Johnny Williams. I am the political officer at NUS, which means I basically support and the lead political support for our national president, Megan Dunn. But I'm asked to run this webinar for you. I used to work in our membership team and used to help support our elections process in the last 2 years. I don't know what that sound means, so I'll just ignore that. But I used to run our election support, and I'm back for one day only, which is this webinar session. So hopefully I will remember it. Every slide may be a surprise, but we will see where we get to. Please say who you are and where you're from and what your role is in your union in the chat box, and I'll try and make sure that some content is specific to you, and I will try and think off the top of my head to know it's as useful as possible. Do let me know if some of the things you will help out of it. So, a disclaimer for this session, and hopefully everyone's here for, you don't all just leave the one straight away, because that would be embarrassing for me. But there's 5 of us all together, and this is about election support over the next year as we head towards elections, or you're already in the thick of them on your campus. But this session will not solve all those problems, and elections certainly aren't the be-all and end-all when it comes to engagement. And there's lots of ways of measuring what we're doing, and if you want to learn more about democracy and how to do lots of those things, then there are experts at NUS who can really help you with that. I'm here to give you an overview of our election support and some tips from the movement, which we've got as well, which hopefully will be useful to you. Keep rolling in who you are, that's helpful. So hopefully you can learn lessons from across the country, identify ways of minimising complaints and maximising turnout within your campus and within your own elections, and gain clarity from us at NUS, if you use us as your returning officer, how those decisions are made, and what the process is like and who you should speak to, and things like that over the next couple of months. I believe that sounds okay to you. So to begin with, we're going to take a look back at what happened with elections last year. So it says 2015, I know we're still in 2015. That happened in the year 2014-15, and we produce an elections report every year. Runs over local elections from a review that you submit to, and we have headline statistics from 2013, 2014, and now 2015. And in the same focus, we'll produce a guide to 2016. As well. We look at making comparisons across the UK on previous figures. We can't some of it because we don't have all the data from unions, and some of the data because we don't return all your elections. So it is a broad overview of the elections that NUS returns. And it's also, we do change some of the areas about what we're looking at the figures on. So this is the first year where we've analysed data on slightly different terms, including block grants and also on your mission groups at your institution. And each year we do also recommend certain changes regarding rules and regulations, and actually for the first time we've also published a sort of draft regulations for you, which hopefully can be useful and we'll come on to later. So headline statistics in 2015, as you can see, kind of overall percentage turnout as broadly consistent with previous years, and also like this drag the average turnout by mission group by your or is this brand? No, yeah, mission group by the number of students and level of funding that you receive across. That's showing a 1% drop really on average in 2014 in this area. There are changes within individual unions as well. So some unions, whilst they have lots of more money, have actually increased their turnout where they don't have much funding. So it's kind of a random picture, but as you can see, there's kind of peaks where lower funding within unions has meant that turnout isn't as high, but then you get in that kind of middle band between 500,000 and 1 million drops again. So some of it is kind of and really largely depends, I suppose the message from here is on what individual unions are doing rather than kind of a broad spread across the country. You can see that spending there. Staff hours, we also for the first time allocated. So based on your feedback from 2014, we've collected data to allow us to see how much staff time you dedicate to your elections programme. And it shows an average of 200 roughly. As you can see, there's peaks and drops depending on how much your block grant is and towards how much you spend on your elections turnout. So some of the good takeaway from this year's survey, there was fewer complaints and exclusions overall, which is great news, and I hope some of the support is helping ensure that you're making decisions and you appreciate the decisions that NUS is making with you for your returning officer. There were women elected, and we've noticed across the country a big push in terms of women candidates standing and unions supporting women and running programs specifically around women in leadership to help those figures. So we're actually seeing an increase in those. We're also big to see a lot more data that we can use in elections processes, obviously because online voting is really helping us able to do that and really drill into who's voting, where they're voting from, at what time, and things that we previously weren't really able to do with the systems we had. Institutions are, you say that they're broadly supportive of your work with elections and trying to increase turnout, which is great news. There's obviously more to do, and where NUS can support you in having those conversations with your institutions, we can put you in touch with someone. And actually 1 in 5 candidates also come from an international background, which is perhaps higher than it's been in the past, which is good news for those of you who've been trying intensively to increase international student representation. Trends that were repeated this year include the one that women were 3 times less likely to stand, but 3 times more likely to win they did. So that's an encouragement in terms of once women stand, they are likely to get elected and 3 times more likely than their male counterparts. But the problem still stands that they're 3 times less likely to stand. And I know lots of unions have been some innovative projects and a women in leadership program here at NUS as well, which has really been trying to encourage different forms of leadership within student unions and across the movement to try and turn that figure around. But you know, it's still a trend that is being repeated. It's certainly one that we should talk about, particularly when women are more likely to win when they stand. And as I said in the slide before, we've seen more women elected, so these programs are obviously having an effect. And campaigning time doesn't matter too much, and this is a trend that we've seen for the last 2 years now that we've run this survey previous to this one, where it doesn't really matter how long you leave voting time open for, or how long you allow candidates to campaign for. It really seems to have that much impact on turnout, which is, and some people kind of have seen in the past, well, maybe if I increase my voting time from 3 days to 7 days, then you know, we'll have more chance of hitting more students and will likely increase the turnout. But that isn't a trend that we across the country. There are obviously circumstances where those unions have increased their turnout, but actually largely it's not a trend that we see. But we've seen an increasing one around less physical campaigning, so less supporters standing outside, leafleting, door knocking, that kind of thing, and a move, I suppose, towards digital campaigning, emails, Facebook and Twitter being more and more important for student support and officer elections. This is an increasing trend as well, and one we've seen increase, but also has been consistently important around diversity and engagement. So where there has been a more diverse group of candidates, what you've often seen is better engagement and an increase in turnout there. So important again to focus for the 3rd year running that if you're looking to increase your turnout or engagement with students on your campus, and you want to, you know, you've got a sub-campus and you're not sure to get to them, diversity you have, and like that's seen obviously with the increase in international students as well, and women. So there is more diversity. Better engagement is a continuing trend. There's some ongoing issues with data, so not being able to share data with institutions enough, and student status. So data sets either being out of date and not being able to confirm somebody's student status when they're running as a candidate, and that obviously causes problems once they're in the election, and whether they're seen as a valid officer or not. A mix of online and paper ballots. People are still doing both, and that does cause some concern for particularly annual counts, make the process quite long and complicated, particularly with some changes in the way, for example, at NUS, we have reserved places for women within our elections, and so when you're electing your NUS delegates, it's much harder to do that, and then you've got to work out a process of whether you put all the ballots online and insert and kind of them all out one by one, or whether you print all the votes off and run a paper count, which is obviously two different ways of doing that, but it is easier to pick one of them. Complaints, delays, or problems of people coming in with complaints 3 days or 4 days after they have happened. Mobile voting devices continues to be an issue where people may allow iPods. I'm going backwards years, not iPods, iPads. People being able to vote on an iPad or on their phone, and our existing rules saying things like you're not allowed to be within 1 metre or 2 metres of that person, causing problems because it's very difficult to. We'll come on to some of that later. Compulsory briefings, where people are being made to turn up to events that might necessarily shut them out of a process, and feeds into that idea of diversity of candidates. The autonomy of a returning officer, we can come on to this when we talk about NUS and whether NUS as your returning officer helps increase that autonomy, and also what institutions are looking for. And endorsements, so existing sabbatical officers sabbatical officers endorsing people, or former sabbatical officers endorsing people, or even celebrities. I think there's been some ongoing issues with somebody from One Direction that managed at one union to be endorsed within the race, and that caused some concern by the other candidates that they weren't being endorsed by One Direction. I would have no about the details of that, but certainly an interesting one that maybe you will have to deal with in the year ahead. Complaints and exclusion, average number of formal complaints was 2.4, and out of those, 0.8 were exclusions, so we're looking at quite low. I didn't write this slide, but the international students are more likely to be excluded than home students, which is intriguing and something I imagine we will want to look into. That trend is continued, and whether there's some issues there about language barriers or rules not being understood, or perhaps something wider there. So interesting point to have a reflection on. So that's the roundup really of the elections report. Overall, the figures staying roughly the same, and not really a strong correlation between spending of grant and average turnout. And like I said, the trending remains where candidate mix more important than candidate volume, and the average number of candidates increased actually from 27 to 26, but very marginally. And like we said, staff hours roughly around 200 per union. Overview where we are. 2015 rules. So the principles we have looked at NUS are developing over the last couple of years, and we've worked very closely with NUS University Union as well to help compile essentially a set of regulations that help some principles about what we're trying to do with elections, to try and inform conversations that you're having locally. It's meant to be an exhaustive list, and this is a kind of basic election regulations work, but hopefully one that is useful. So the principles that were developed look at aim to elect people fair and fair, not looking to give everyone an equal chance of winning, but a fair one. Based on those principles of equality and fairness and the difference between them. Should help candidates to engage better where we can, so actually actively trying to ensure that candidates can do as much as they can within the process, rather than saying, well, we have to step away, we can't talk to them. I remember in my days in the students' union when somebody and had a candidate and somebody would be like, no, we can't talk to the candidates, we can't support them in any way. But there are clearly ways that you can support them to engage better, and where they feel that they can go out and sell the union and go off and find new voters and engage them, because it's an important time for engaging your members, and we almost kind of franchise that out to candidates, and we trust them, and they have the responsibility to go out and engage all these new people. And said, where those come from a more diverse background, it's a really exciting way of engaging more and more people in your union. So being able to support candidates, and we should feel that can help them. Don't tear up your rules every year, so lots of reviews, but actually setting these key principles instead can sometimes help. If you can't police it, sanction against it, then there's no point having it. And there's always a debate running these sessions about iPads and whether you can police them or whether you can't. But general principle of if you can't police the rule that you have, then there's no need for it to be in your elections. regulations. If it's no impact, again, like it depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to drive turnout, increase the diversity of your candidates, ensure maximum engagement with students, rules aren't contributing to that, or your activities aren't contributing to that, then don't do them. For things people think is vital, so you can only spend up to £50 on posters. Well, everyone will go towards the £50 mark because it sounds more like a goal than kind of a limit, and people see that as the expectation rather than seeing it as a rule. So if you actually write things down around pricing, around resources, actually what you may be doing is forcing people to spend that much money or have those resources when they might not need them. If you write an exhaustive list of things that are allowed, people will think they need them all. So they're not to have too many things written down, but actually like keeping it, as I said, to these principles and around that sense that this is about equality. So if somebody has access to a printing firm, then they have to kind of access the cost of that because that's equality to the and fairness to the other person who doesn't have the access to it, but they can of course buy those resources. Active opportunity is not the same as forcing all candidates to be equal. All candidates will come from very different aspects and very different backgrounds regarding elections and what they've done and their experiences. What you're trying to do is ensure that everyone has that equal to get involved, but not necessarily force all the candidates to do the same thing or be the same. And usually, as I said, this all points to the fact that the fewer rules, the better. That feeds into that idea that we're lowering complaints. Certainly not unrelated to the fact that lots of people are beginning to reduce the number of rules they have. In making elections a positive experience for everyone, that's kind of our defining aim here. And there are lots of annoying rules that returning officers feed back to us and say are still remain in many elections legislations on your campus that should come to bring, and it's completely essential. Excuse me. Failure to attend or result in disqualification. Well, as soon as you say that, it doesn't come to that briefing. Are you actually going to disqualify them that, even if they have a legitimate reason or perhaps a reason that certain candidates from background wouldn't be able to attend a briefing, for example, at 9 o'clock in the morning if they've got caring responsibilities or if they're a young parent. So actually, are we creating rules that are going to force a certain type of candidate to not be able to stand that we're then going to want to consider later? Is there any reason to have that briefing? Can it be done in a different way? And do we really want to disqualify people for not attending a meeting? Obviously, there is formal obligations that candidates will need to do, and they will need to sign disclaimers and all of that. But there is probably a better way of doing that than all at a briefing. I'm regret saying it because inevitably there will be somebody who says they didn't read about it or something, and you won't disqualify them, and therefore, given what we said already about our principles, it's probably something we're going to be able to legislate against, and therefore probably not an ideal rule to have. Just their candidacy prior to campaigning. It doesn't do anyone any good. You want as many people talking about the elections for probably as long as you can, but also it's impossible to police. The candidate is talking about their campaign before the deadline in a bar or in a coffee shop or in a library. Are we really going to them within the process for doing so? I don't think we would, and therefore it's not a useful rule to have. Inclusion criticised and sabbaticals can't express a view. Actually, is that what you want your union to be based on? Should there be kind of the ability to scrutinise the work of the union elections? And do you want everyone to have an equal chance, where you don't allow incumbents to be mentioned sometimes? When people are running against an incumbent, they find it very, very difficult because obviously the incumbent's already been there a year and has been heavily profiled within your union. Therefore, it's quite difficult to hold them to account. And also, do you want your sabbatical team to be able to have a view about how they want the union to continue, and obviously ensure that there's no harassment, bullying, or kind of anxious communications that are directed in a personal way, but instead are focused more on the work and the view of what you want your union to look like. Slates have been an interesting one, actually, and this may be a slide I need to skip past in a bit. But one area within the report was really that by 20, they were kind of 50-50 split about whether you allow slates or not, and slates being where a number of candidates can collaborate with each other and advocate a vote for each other. Asked you that in 2013, it certainly wasn't the case that most of you did so. By last year, some 58% said that you did. So it's quite an increase. This year, actually, that figure then jumped to 72%. So 72% of the unions are allowing candidates to open work and collaborate together, which is a big increase on where we were 2 years ago. And actually, what we've seen there is candidates who aren't from necessarily the usual backgrounds or the usual power sectors within your union being able to get together, form a campaign, share resources, and that make it more likely that the diversity within elections has increased. No campaigning in the U building, which kind of strikes against everything we want people to do. Maybe not, ruining the work with stickers, but certainly we do want people to be having a vibrant, positive elections campaign, and that includes in the building, obviously, where you need to speak to your university or your college about the institution's property, then that's a different kind of role there. But certainly where we have property, we might want to look at how we make it as the most inclusive space for elections possible. Others can spend whatever they want. It will be a rule that is difficult to police, and so some limits should be expected. But like we say, you want to look at how maybe you present those. Officers always find it quite difficult to judge when we say that you should deduct 5% or 3% if you've had X number of posters over the limit. It just makes it quite difficult, and there's better ways of disciplining for something that has an impact on the vote, and where it doesn't, we're kind of playing around with it, getting to the heart of the problem. And needless deadlines, just take a look at your deadlines and look at what you can and can't kind of move around and ensure that candidates have as much flexibility, but also voters do as well. I suppose an example of that might be about candidates needing to submit certain paperwork. Actually, if they don't submit a manifesto, well, that's kind of on them, and then it's equality for the voters to decide whether they want to that candidate. There's necessity that they have a manifesto. Obviously, you give the greatest chance of running in the election, but it's kind of a needless task for you to manage. So, like I say, we've produced these model based on trying to take a lot of those things out, and you can download that as well on NUS Connect. There's around 15 to 20 rules which we think are sufficient to regulate elections, and they are obviously in addition to the rules that you already have as a union. And people sometimes forget this. They think we need to replicate everything into the union regulations for the elections, but actually overall your rules and your values will already guide a lot of this, as will university rules and regulations, and of course the law as well. So some people sometimes forget that things that are against the law remain against the law during an elections process. So they're broken down into kind of key areas. I don't know if they're on the next slide. They're not. So I will. Oh, they are. Yeah, they are. I think they are. I'll talk through them. Sorry. So in terms of candidate behaviour, and this is where we're trying to make sure that them together around the core areas. So candidate behaviour, making sure that we take reasonable steps to ensure that they comply with these rules, and I'll run through them. That makes more sense. And be able to demonstrate they have taken reasonable steps to ensure that their own campaigners comply if there is a complaint against them. And candidates may need alter, move or remove their own campaign materials. So candidates may only use mailing lists where lawful to do so. And actually that's largely around data protection. So in most cases, it requires the consent of members on the list to be able to be contacted. So if they've obviously opted into allowing the student union to speak to them, you could use emailing, but you might not be able to legally send a list of all your students to each candidate and new campaigners. Conveners must not communicate with voters in a way where they have already begun to complete their ballots. So this is something that you could technically piece that isn't iPad specific or paper ballot specific or around meters or things that can be complained about, because actually it's something that person the voter. So if there is a complaint and they say I felt intimidated and pressured to that whilst I was already trying to complete my ballot, that they were trying to force me to change my mind, then that is something you can investigate, because that's how somebody felt. Whereas if there's a photo of somebody who can be judged whether that was a meter or a meter and a half, without them going back to the person anyway, and that makes it about whether they felt intimidated, because even if somebody stood a meter behind somebody with an iPad, it doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to make them change their mind on their vote. Campers must be pass their ballots freely, and that's quite a general principle as opposed to a rule. But obviously, as part of that, that bribes can't be offered as part of campaigning. So the next section, so that's kind of the conduct issues. You've got the hang of this now. You might be doubting it, but I think I'm there. So that's all around candidate behaviour, and this is the first section of the rules, and hopefully this will make on materials. So campaign bits should be announced by the returning officer at the beginning of each academic year, and that will be obviously your deputy returning officer, where NUS is your returning officer, and the campaigners must not exceed those budgets. And therefore, you're not setting individual lists about how much somebody must spend on each material, but giving them a broader view of you've got a certain amount of money and you can split that up however. So, and as campaigners must submit a written list of the costs, and ensuring that they are corresponding with the materials that they've spent. And if candidates don't spend any money, then they also make that clear, because some people, particularly we have seen candidates win where they have just focused on a social media campaign and not necessarily used any campaign resources. And a statement of market rate, so that everyone's judged freely, no matter whether they actually pay for it or whether they can pull it in as a favour. But you're using items that are freely and readily available to all campaigners. Of course, things that people can things that everyone can get access to, but you're only really making it something when people have access to resources that they will have for free that somebody else won't have, and that does count towards their overall budget. What somebody else can use freely available and readily items. Two areas which we've kind of stipulated, conduct and budgets, and they're the kind of only areas with the core rules, and then trying to provide a kind of evidence-led interpretation of what they might look like, and the returning officer takes this focus on that, which makes sense, and then the interpretation is made by them. There's a clear kind of principles document, and then the guidance on how to make those decisions sits with the officer. So if that is NUS for you, we can come back to how those decisions are made later on. So making elections a positive experience for everyone. Culture to try and, based on those principles, what can we do within our unions to ensure that this is a positive experience for everyone, and that we're not all walking around with our heads down, not talking to anyone, complaining about complaints all the time, and having to be dogged down in emails backwards and forwards between candidates, rather than getting out there and saying that this is a massive moment to engage with the student body. And actually, when our elections are on, there's sometimes the point where you will engage the most amount of students all year. So these questions, how are you actively encouraging positive culture amongst candidates? Are you having breakfast meetings where they can all get together and see that they're all part of the same thing, rather than kind of encouraging them to just not talk process? How do you protect also your union's relationship with its members? So as I said earlier, this is kind of, it can be seen that we're sometimes franchising out to lots of individual campaigns teams and just hoping that they don't tell people that the student union is something that it's not, or give you a bad reputation. And actually, the way it might be worth doing that is looking at things like, in those breakfast meetings, giving people clear briefs, information on how to describe what the union does. Do you produce kind of handbooks that you can hand out at the same point, going like, come and get involved in your students' union, so that when a candidate is faced with the question of, well, we don't know what the union is, they're well briefed, well rehearsed during that process, and really being able to sell the relationship to the student already, and a great moment to get students involved and engaged in union. Thanks to this idea of how you actively trying to introduce people to democracy. It may well be the first time they've had to vote if a general election hasn't happened, and younger students not have had a chance to vote before. Older students might not have ever voted before, and the lack of citizenship education or political education within schools means that sometimes when the university or college, the first time they actually vote is during the sabbatical elections. So what does it mean to vote? Are we actively explaining in our message why it's important, rather than just vote? And including actually some of the principles we were talking about earlier around international students as well, that it may well be that a couple of students and students from different countries may well be the first time that we're introducing them to democracy in itself as well, and that is all important to bear in mind when we're briefing and speaking to candidates, and ensuring that they're going out, selling our union, being positive about it, but also helping people on the process. Why aren't they engaging? Well, they might just not understand as you're asking them to do. Likely to be your candidate's first experience of campaigning as well as voting. How can you help them? Can you, again, brief them? Can you give them examples of what other campaigns have been doing? Do you want to encourage them to come to workshops where they can access communication specialists if you have them, or they can sit down for half an hour with an existing sabbatical officer and get knowledge and experience of like how to engage with students the best, because this is our opportunity to engage with as many students as we can. Also kind of put yourself in the view of a voter. If I've never been involved in the union before, I've never visited campus, I'm a home student, and I don't live in halls, can I fully participate? Am I going to receive all the marketing? If I do live off campus and I get the all student email, is that enough compared to a student who will be getting leafleted and flyers outside the library, outside the union, and then will be receiving lecture outs? Is there a way that we can ensure that the institution is supporting that as well? And are we ensuring that our ballot station or there's computers available for people who might not have internet at home? Thinking about how many communication specialists you employ. So this is feeding back again to the report, where we're spending on roughly 100 hours per union on this. But what results is your staff putting into this? So are you just trying to drive up turnout by asking people to vote, or going out and trying to reach as many students, or are you actively trying to help support the campaigns and the candidates? And what I've seen in the past is where you put money and more focus into supporting and raising the profile of the candidates, particularly, as I said, where they are from a diverse background. That's what really drives turnout. So rather than just running campaigns which say go out and vote, really trying to address it. This is the candidate's views, like these are the things where people can engage with the policies and what they're standing for. And then this is how you vote, this is how you vote for this person. And actively selling the kind of process and the people, because that's where we find our emotional attachment with people. We're driven by the campaigns, and are there specialists who can also help support campaigners with ideas and resources to go out there and reach out to your student membership. Suggestions from some other unions. This one's from the University of Manchester. So here's loads of things that they did. They had a rebrand of their election around UCAN, which I'm assuming is around the idea that you can do anything if you get involved in your union, and that you really utilising that staff team and their strengths. What are they in to do, and where can they support the candidates in the process? To change and democracy, which I will come on to. I think there's a slide on that, I'm hoping anyway. Candidate liaison and free printing, so being able to access designated staff support where they can do that and where they can engage as well. And printed credit, I think that's, you get money off if you vote in the elections, and that goes through on your card. Web info, who agrees with you, so a kind of game focus where you are asked policy questions and it matches you with different candidates. So then an example where Manchester ran candidate training about how to talk to students and how to engage with people, showing candidates stats so that they can see who's voting, where they're voting, who we haven't engaged yet, and really trying to drive the campaign to think about the strategy, who do they want to engage with, how can they go out and do that. Having voting stations up where people kind of get involved, videos about what's happening today, targeted emails, all the things that we do, but trying to really pull them together as a drive around how we support the candidates and profile them, and give them the best platform to go out and engage and win the votes of students themselves. Blogs and I suppose an increase in social media activity and targeted campaigning there. Democracy. So tea and coffee for voting, unknown in itself in terms of the estimated impact, but certainly the use of voting stations massively increased. So where they were handing out free couple of tea, driving people to those states, and you were able to target your resources around them. And as I say, it's a minimal cost, and you're able to get it quite easily. But an idea there, one example of a turnout booster that you can run as a union, that you can then run candidates to drive people to vote and get a free cup of tea. I don't drink tea, but you might like tea. Here's another one. Here's the free printed credit. So you get 20 worth of printed credit. Believed kind of estimated high impact. People are driven by this kind of stuff. It's good because it relates to their education and saves them money. But at the same time, kind of gives an incentive that isn't necessarily just handing out prizes, but things that actually can help students. And here you go. This is from a Manchester survey, where what persuaded you to vote for a candidate. Well, you can see there, I saw banners. I read one of their flyers. Letter that they came to speak to me. So is where are we flying? Where are we going out? And point candidates to make sure that their kind of points are really well received and seen by students. And actually, I think we'll probably see in the next few years some of these shifts. So reading posts on social media, for example, will probably increase, and a number of different aspects within there, but still heavily reliant on kind of quite flyering-based physical activities. But as I said, the turnout suggests that those things are, this from the report suggesting those things are beginning to change. Overview about how we're using the figures of the to look at the individual trends, and then what some of the things you can do in there. So there's obviously the draft regulations, which do have a look at and see if you can mirror some of those in, and that will obviously help contain more complaints and make it more positive. And there's some ideas there if you are looking to boost your turnout, but also more importantly, find new students and new groups to engage with, and really using your candidates and your campaigns as the way of doing that. Bit is about how you get the most out of NUS in terms of our election support and what we can do to help you if you're a returning officer, or if you're considering moving to NUS as your returning officer in the year ahead. This is Election Support Services exists to promote that fairness that we were talking about, so that candidates feel supported in elections and feel like everyone's able to participate to the best of their ability. To process to make sure that your rules are met, and that you are trained and you have access to expertise to ensure that they are the best, and that's why we've published for the first time these draft regulations. That principle that we're all here to elect people rather than exclude people. We're not here to just police every aspect of our own processes, but instead to really create that vibrant, exciting time, everyone to really access democracy, whether for the first time or not. This comes from the idea that we're an independent national body, and that there is an assurance to institutions that you're meeting the regulatory obligations under the Education Act that you need to meet, and theirs is obviously around that. There are sabbatical officers, or there are officers elected in fair and free elections around student representation. Also, hopefully sharing best practice across the movement. So a massive thanks to Manchester for those ideas as well. Some do send them in to us. because the next person to have to wade through this PowerPoint can have some more content to work with. So this year, and we always appoint a returning officer that you can name. So if you are using NUS as your returning officer, you can name Peter Robertson, who's our Deputy Chief Exec here at NUS, as the National Returning Officer this year. Peter is going to be supported by a group of staff here who will also be supporting him and advising him on the decisions to make, and they will make up our kind of elections panel that we have each year. And that is also delivered through a network of membership engagement executives, which are the new way that NUS supports members, and it used to be your end contact, but now will sit with your MEE, or membership engagement executive across the country, who you should know and have a good relationship with. And of course, if you're not sure who they are or things have changed, then do get in touch with our membership team and we will put you in touch. The membership engagement executives will not be acting as returning officer, but they will be helping to support you to ensure that not many of your complaints will need to come all the way to Peter, and that will mean that it's a quicker process for you, and then you can make judgments quite quickly, particularly if some of you are trying to make sure that you're clearing any complaints each day, so the candidates can go out with that positive attitude and they don't have complaints or process issues dragging over their head. So if you are hosting breakfast meetings and briefings for candidates, that you're able in the morning to say, this was the decision, this is where it was made, and that's where we're trying to ensure we support you on that in terms of timing, and that's why the membership engagement executives are involved, so that they can liaise with you, they can give you some support, and if things do need to go to Peter, they can help you manage that process as well. So they won't be signing off you're electing final judgments, but they will be helping provide that link between you on the ground and Peter, who obviously can't be all over the country. But they should know your union, they should know who you are, and they will have a context then of your rules. So make sure that you do send them a copy of your rules and your regulations so that they can read over them and get to know them, so that we can have a kind of shared idea of that interpretation from the returning officer, and there's no kind of conflict in those decisions being made. If you come along to your candidates briefing, they're running. We do have some video resources, as always, that you can use, and they're readily available online. But you can also speak to your MEE for anything further that is useful for you, and they will be able to attend that. So if you have a problem during your elections, your membership engagement executive is the first person to speak to. If there's any uncertainty or you can't come to a decision between you don't feel comfortable, you want the returning officer's decision, then let them know and they'll speak to Peter. If you are thinking of excluding somebody from your elections, we do say that we would call exclusions to go automatically to Peter, and they should do, and your membership executive will know that as well. So you're not expected to rule on whether to exclude somebody or not, and that should come to Peter as returning officer. Around to map it to your requirements during the voting period, and that if your elections sit outside the usual returning period for across the country is kind of late February, March, then do let us know. But make sure we've got your election dates and your membership executive has your date. We can make sure we can still provide this support to you. But during your voting period, you should be getting a response from your membership engagement executive within 2 hours, and that should help you clear reports and complaints very quickly during the day. And it will be a maximum of 24 hours from Peter. So hopefully that fits your timetable, and you can build that into your election support so that candidates know that there will be a response on anything, including an exclusion within that time. Obviously, if there's more details that needed to be collected, then we'll need to do that. And that might take longer, but you will get a decision on most things within that 24-hour period from Peter. Your membership executive can come along and oversee your count, and they'll be trained to do so. And any issues will be reported to Peter with those on your behalf. Like I said, if there is an investigation, then you'll be working with evidence that we need to be for him to be able to make that decision. A decision is made either by your membership executive committee, executive, and there's any disagreement, then you can speak to Peter directly. Sorry, I'm struggling with that. You can speak to Peter directly by emailing elections@nus.org.uk at any time, and that inbox will be managed so that will also keep up with your requirements in terms of time. if you have further questions and you can't think of any now, just feel free in the next kind of 5 minutes to whack stuff in the chat box if there is anything that's helpful, and I will try and answer that. Your membership engagement executive is also the first person you should go to with any initial questions. If you know who they are, we put you in touch. Just email elections@nus.org.uk for any of those related questions, and they will either be passed straight to you at me, or they will be passed on to Peter as returning officer. I need to make sure that I copy and paste the webinar in so Sam doesn't turn off. So I'll do that now. We should be so please this time hopefully has written this can run you through it, but hopefully that wasn't too bad. And like I say, like it's all about creating that vibrant for candidates and for voters on campus, and hopefully those draft regulations which are in here and you can access on NUS Connect will help you. Hopefully knowing the process and knowing who to speak to within our election support will be helpful. And then lastly, like understanding what it is that can help drive out turnout, that really diverse candidate mix can all be good things that can help positive experience for your elections. And yeah, if you've got any questions or then do send them across to elections@nus.org.uk and check out for more of the resources on NUS Connect, which we have. And I can't